Now, they say variety, people, is the spice of life. And where Mikel Arteta and Arsenal are concerned, it very much is spicy. We've got some fantastic options at left back and at right back. While I don't expect to see our two centre halves in Williams, Saliba and Gabriel rotated or moved out or dislodged, you never know, people. You do have a number of players that can play centre half as well as the left and right hand side. So I thought in this video, why not have a bit of a play around and see tactically what we could expect or what, Mikel Arteta might be thinking. Let's move on anyways. Now, one thing I think is forgotten, people, is that while Timber has made a career of playing centre half, he previously partnered Lisandro Martinez at Ajax with such. And when we signed him, it was probably assumed he would be competing with Benjamin White for the fullback position, which he is. We've got a lot of versatility. He played left back in his initial career at Arsenal, did very well in the Community Shield. And for all of the talking points from the season that's just gone, the 2023-24 campaign, I do think had we have seen a sustained Timber at left back and a Thomas Partey in midfield, I'm not saying we would have won trophies. I'm just thinking about how good we was in all aspects. I genuinely believe we would be better. Now, what if Benjamin White, for whatever reason, isn't in the team now? It's his position to lose, I believe. I think Timber is great at left back. I think he could do a job at centre half. He's primarily been exposed to centre half minutes in pre-season because he's able to play there, and probably because of, we haven't had our full team available in this early preparation phase. But what if, for whatever reason, Benjamin White is not available and we have Calafiori and Timber? Now, obviously, Timber can invert. Timber can, obviously, if Calafiori goes forward, can become, one of the centre halves as we look to progress play, and Declan Rice does his thing and Thomas Partey drops into the six. Likewise, he could overlap with Saka, and I think Timber and Saka down the right-hand side would be crazy. Imagine Saliba, Timber, Odegaard in the pockets, and whoever up front. You can forget about it. And maybe I'm dream chasing a bit with this, people, but if I just put Calafiori and Timber back where they are and temporarily just move our midfield about and move the centre midfielders, what if, and again, I'm dream chasing, but just for argument's sake, what if Calafiori, because we typically only see one player invert at Arsenal, Timber, Calafiori, Tomiyasu, Benjamin White, they could all do it. So you could apply this to any of them. But what if they both inverted? For instance, if David Raya's got the ball, Gabriel splits, probably in games we, could afford to do this. Timber inverts, Calafiori inverts. Obviously, Declan Rice does not need to be there. You could probably even gamble they go a bit higher up the field because Partey will probably drop and act as the first kind of port of call if our centre-backs do not get the ball. Naturally, Odegaard, he's a smart man. He'll take up certain areas that people are not. Martinelli and Declan Rice the same. And then I just feel I feel there's just so many different ideas that Mikel Arteta undoubtedly knows exactly what he wants to do. But for us fans gearing up into the Premier League season, it could be crazy. I mean, imagine they've both inverting, people. Now, obviously, in reality, you lose the ball, we're in trouble. But could you imagine it? What you're probably likely to see is one of the two invert, whether that's Calafiori or whether that's Timber. And obviously, likewise, as we go further up the field, once again, naturally, that's probably some loose kind of shape. Declan Rice will be making those runs. Martinelli and Bukayo Saka will be looking to get onto the ball. And you've also got Kai Havertz making late runs, and we all know Kai Havertz could drop in behind, and that allows runners. But I'm going off brand and off topic. Let's stick to the topic at hand. The market is not closed. There's talk about bringing Moreno in, and we don't know what Mikel Arteta is going to do. We actually don't know the first 11 on paper. I think it's safe to assume, based on last season, regardless of Gabriel Jesus' form, and we hope it continues in pre-season, Kai Havertz, Bukayo Saka, Martinelli, Martin Odegaard, Thomas Partey, if fit, asterisk, Declan Rice, Gabriel Saliba, Benjamin White. And while we don't know who actually is going to be the first choice left back, because in theory it could be Calafiori, considering the money he's been signed for. It could be Timber, considering he probably would have been that, and he's versatile and well-rounded in all positions. I don't think it would be Zinchenko, but he's an option in the squad. And at this moment in time, while his future is subject to speculation, and I don't think there's a single Arsenal fan that expects Jacob Kivior respectfully to be the first choice option, I don't know what Mikel Arteta is doing. But I'm going to assume, based on the fact that, he done well for Bologna, the way Mikel Arteta has spoken about him, the money he's been signed for, the fact that he's a natural left footer, I'm inclined to believe that he would be the first choice. And while I don't want to harp on too too much about your natural foot and stuff like that. The fact that he's a left footer and he's more likely to, let the ball roll across his body and receive it on the left hand side. What I simply mean by that is his bias would be, you can't really see from this angle, would be to receive it on his left hand side and drive forward. Now, if we assume that says Timber, obviously Timber can do that, but as a Sunday League right back that plays on the left hand side, I do use my left peg, but typically your touch is probably going to take you slightly inwards, and it doesn't kill the passing lanes. Of course, you could pick out passes, you could turn and things like that, but that's that. So let's just assume definitely not Kivi, or Calafiori, apologies, is the first choice left back. Now we know we can go long, knock it down to Havertz and get people involved in that ilk. Equally, we know in reality, in terms of playing out from the back, we can knock it around with our defenders, and Raya can go long and sometimes skip out defenders and go into midfield or straight into Odegaard, who's known to drop deep from time to time, people. But you probably would see something along the lines of, if David Raya's got the ball in a typical case, people, if we move the midfield for a sec, Calafiori probably be here. Gabriel will create a bit of width. Obviously, Saliba will be protecting. Benjamin White, he does overlap. He does venture into midfield, but at times he acts like a safety net, really and truly. And again, this isn't the best to scale, but you would imagine you'd see something along the ilk of that. Calafiori inside in midfield. Declan Rice will probably be slightly further forward. You'd have Partey offering an angle there, and Odegaard has the option to stay out here, go out wide, or drop deep into midfield. And Saka and Martinelli would be in the half spaces. Kai Havertz would probably be where he is, and this gives us numerous passing lanes and passing angles. Obviously, it's very easy to say this when there isn't an opposition player trying to close you down, so we probably would see stuff of that ilk. Now, if we get some defenders, or better yet, another team in for a second, people, let's ignore the numbers, really, and just get players on the field. What color should we use? Let's go with purple. No, the goalie's got that. Apologies, people. Let's go with blue. It is my favorite color, even though I'm an Arsenal fan. Now, you're never going to see a number 1 out wide, but just because it's somewhat easier to kind of make out, obviously, let's go over there. Pardon me. Apologies. Let's get these all in here. And again, people, when we're playing out from the back, you'd imagine you're going to see, a striker attempt to press. They're going to try and close down Benjamin White. Somebody's going to half be in the half space here. You're going to have a couple of midfielders trying to cut out lanes and things like that, and try and be narrow and whatnot in that regards, people. You're probably going to see something similar to such. And of course, playing against Arsenal, they're going to try and press us a lot more tighter than this in reality. It just makes it slightly easier for you lot to see. So the angles are not quite as close cut, but you would imagine you'd see something along this ilk, people. Now, for me personally, people, we've shown we can bypass presses. That's why we work on playing out from the back. We've shown we can press aggressively from the front. Now, a quick side note, if we just assume that we are in fact trying to press from the front, let's remove several players here and just get this. Let's make this as potentially as narrow as we potentially can. Typically, we've got teams camped in their own half, essentially, people. We've got teams camped in their own half. They're quite narrow. Again, apologies that it's not specifically to scale. Kai Havertz would be there. Odegaard would be the next line of defense from attack in terms of the press. Odegaard and Martinelli would be, just behind Kai Havertz, as would Bukayo Saka. You'd imagine Declan Rice would be right up in there. Let's exaggerate it a bit more just because it's easier. Calafiori probably be inverting in there. Benjamin White, it all depends on what Benjamin White's role of that specific moment is, because there's times he would be like that, there's times he'll be like that, there's times he'd actually, both of them in Calafiori and White could venture into midfield and just simply put, suffocate the defense, people, or better yet, the whole opposition. Now, we know we've got tall players, we've got defensively sound players, we've got players that are switched on, we've got street smart players, but we've got dynamic players, and obviously I think all of our attacking players could venture forward. Now, I would call and describe this one as the wild card in games which, to be honest, there's not too many games where Arsenal are on the back foot. Even against Manchester City, I want to pick my words very wisely because City are better than us, but we're quite evenly matched, we're quite competitive. I don't want to overreach, but long gone of the days where Arsenal just sit back and absorb pressure. Of course, throughout 90 minutes, Football is like a boxing match. You can't always land jabs. Sometimes you need to take some punches. So I would describe what you're seeing on screen as very defensive. But could you imagine in games where we just want to close out shop, get 3 points, games where we might be on the back foot, for Real Madrid, for example, it is a bit defensive, people. But I describe this as the wild card. As you know, Calafiori has shown he can play at left back as well as at centre half, in a back four as well as in a back three. And again, there are different denominations, but just allow me to humour you lot, yeah? Obviously, with Kai Havertz, we've seen with the luxury of him and Raya, we can go long to Havertz and then look to bring players in as we contest the first and second duels and pass the ball around the pitch. And then obviously, Gabriel Jesus and Havertz, they'll work their socks off. Martin Odegaard would also lead the press. You've got two physical monsters in midfield of Tomiyasu and Declan Rice. So if you're lucky to beat our first press or the first line of defense with our strikers, you're fortunate enough to get past somehow Thomas Partey and Declan Rice. You've got Benjamin White, William Saliba, Gabriel Calafiori and Timber. Obviously, if we were to sit in a low block, forget about it, which is something regardless of the formation we've looked to bring in. Of course, there are many different ways you could tweak a back three, people. I just went with, assuming our backs were against the wall. And again, a back three is only as defensive or as offensive as the team's ethos. So again, if we just remove defensive situations for a hot second and assume we're on the front foot, of course, Martin Odegaard is there to link up with Gabriel Jesus and obviously Kai Havertz, who pulls out wide from time to time. Jesus the same. Declan Rice has shown he's got the dynamism in that regards. And obviously Thomas Partey is a unicorn in that he's very good defensively when we do see him and very good in the final third. And Timber needs no license to fly forward. Calafiori is very good, as stated, at defending wide areas. That means our whole team, in theory, could potentially gallop a bit forward. Obviously, Saliba would probably be tucked in. And it's Gabriel, because I think Gabriel will benefit in an attacking sense. I think he's very good on the ball, but when he plays with Kirill or Zinchenko, he's too concerned as to what's going out there, because typically Kirill is quite narrow in this regards. So that means obviously a rival attacker has a lot of free space. If we disregard that for a second, Calafiori is great at that. Obviously, Calafiori you can actually stretch your back three as much as you want. Obviously, Benjamin White and Timber would be on their bike, and they're very good in an attacking sense in that regard. So I think that is something we could look at, people. Of course, if we just reset everybody very briefly, people, of course, a back three, or if we Arsenal were to switch to a back three, and again, I only want to see this on occasion, in-game, or the rare times we might, Arteta might see something differently. I don't want to see this on a consistent basis, people. If we just quickly reset everybody again, put Thomas Partey and Declan Rice over there. Of course, I've gone with a two up front because I feel that's the more organic. But naturally, you could, not that I want to see it, you could, with Partey, Declan Rice, Gabriel and Saliba, say, you know what, just because it's a lot easier, say, you know what, Saka, you have the day off, for example. And probably Trossard is probably more geared towards this. And again, this unicorn selection I've had, it would need a lot of tweaking. Trossard's probably better to play as a left wing back or an organic left back, if I'm honest with you, then Martinelli. But you could also tweak it slightly, people. And you could technically have, obviously, Mr. Martinelli, Mr. Bukayo Saka. Again, Odegaard, where we speak of someone of his qualities, we don't really speak of the defensive ilk. But his game that he's required to play under Mikel Arteta goes beyond just showing us that he's left-footed and playing silky passes. Obviously, Saliba's good at defending wide areas, as is Calafiori. So if we exaggerate everybody for a second, people, and again, with playing fullbacks, with playing fullbacks, you obviously have to make some attackers miss out. But I do think at the same time, people, with Martinelli and with Bukayo Saka, I think you could gamble with them purely because you've got Declan Rice and Partey, and you've got three competent defenders behind them. And obviously the wingers or slash fullbacks would have to do their job. So there are many different tweaks. As I said, this would kind of be a unicorn selection of myself, people, and it would need a lot of work. But in theory, the theory sounds good. You can knock it up to Havertz. Obviously, you've got Odegaard, you've got Jesus, you've got Martinelli. Jesus typically pulls out wide. Kai will have to pull out to the right. Odegaard would naturally do that. You would need your back three to be a bit more, you need the two midfielders in Thomas Partey and Declan Rice to be adventurous on the ball. But reality, you'd probably need your centre halves, which they're all good at it, to be a bit more adventurous and carry the ball forward, people. You would need Calafiori, obviously, defensively to put in work, but also to gallop forward and allow our players to stay further up the field. The same would be said for William Saliba. And I'm actually, Declan Rice is one thing and Thomas Partey is another. Benjamin White would actually be good in this Saliba role. So that's what I would say could be a kind of random kind of one, if I'm honest with you guys. So with that being said, people, we've got a lot of fantastic options at left back, at right back, God forbid, but if an emergency is required at centre half, we've got a lot of versatile players and crucially good problems for Mikel Arteta. Obviously, in some of the graphics you saw, you didn't see me include Kiwior. I don't know what his future is saying, and you cannot displace Zinchenko because it doesn't appear that he's immediately leaving, and he's clearly not out of Mikel Arteta's thinking. Whether he's first choice or not is another thing. But in short, fantastic options, fantastic problems. Just wish we could speak about the way we're speaking about defense in the same vein as midfield and obviously our attacking options. But, you know, Rome wasn't built in a day. So let me know your thoughts on, you know, what would be your first choice back four? What would be your first choice, you know, left back, right back, centre halves? Admittedly, I don't really want to see any playing around with William Saliba and Gabriel unless one is required to be rested. But yeah, it's good problems, and they're all crucially at the right age profile. They're all in their early to mid-20s, and they can be here for the long term and help us achieve something. So that's all I've got to say, people. But crucially, let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Peace.
Because you always just go, I think, like,